Madam Chairman, if you allow me, very briefly to respond to what Congressman Rohrabacher said.
Sure.
Yes, and I won't take from Mr. Cicilline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, it's very refreshing to see disagreement and genuine debate in a legislative body.
Right.
That is something we've long forgotten in my country. As you know, as a former Speaker of the Russian Parliament, Mr. Gryzlov has said, Parliament is not a place for discussion, and unfortunately that's what it has become under Vladimir Putin. The last time my country had anything resembling a free and fair election was more than 17 years ago, in March of 2000. And this is not me saying it. This is according to observers from the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So when I say again and again that please don't equate Russia with the Putin regime, it means very simply that the current regime is not a product of democratic election. It's not a product of the free choice of our people. And you said, Congressman, one thing which I completely agree with. You said, let's not treat Russia with a double standard. And I think this is very important.
Yes.
We are not worse than you are. We are entitled to the same rights and freedoms that you have. Russia doesn't exist in a vacuum. Russia is a member of the Council of Europe. Russia is a member of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. We have clear international commitments with regard to such areas as free elections, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, the rule of law and due process. The Putin regime has been violating these commitments and these principles for years. And it's not okay, if I could say this, for Western politicians, for Western political leaders to say, forget it, let them do whatever they want to do inside the country. Let's do realpolitik. Let's do business as usual with Mr. Putin. Let's deal with him as if he is, a normal, democratically elected leader. That is not right. That is insulting. Because, we have political prisoners in our country who are sitting in jails for their political beliefs. 3 days ago, we had peaceful opposition rallies on the streets of Russia, and more than 1,500 people were arrested and put to jail, including women, including teenagers. This is not okay. We have no freedom of the press in our country on a large scale. All the major media, all the major television networks are controlled by the government. And as I already mentioned, we have no free elections and have not had free elections for many years. So I think it is very important to remember the values. You mentioned President Reagan several times today. And what President Reagan is remembered for in our part of the world is that he always attached great importance to values. And yes, he engaged with the Soviet leadership on several areas, including arms control, but he also, every time he had a meeting with Soviet leader, he put on a list on the desk, the list of Soviet political prisoners, and he demanded their release. It would be nice to see something similar in terms of principles from the current generation of Western leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. This sort of building off of those comments, according to CNN, our president has spoken positively of President Putin over 70 times, calling him highly respected within his own country and beyond, and saying he's doing, and I quote, a great job. I'm wondering if you could share what you think the impact of that kind of posture by the American president is with respect to our allies in the region and with respect to our enemies in the region. What message does that communicate? It's sort of mystifying to me, but I'm just wondering, what are the geopolitical implications?
Thank you very much. And well, I think there's enough talk in this town about Russians meddling in your domestic politics. I don't want to be one more. So I don't think it's my place to comment on the administration or any political dynamic in the U.S. But I would say this. I think, if you watch Russian state TV, if you watch Kremlin propaganda outlets, you will hear that we, members of the Russian opposition, go to the West and we ask for money. We ask for political support. We ask for regime change. Of course, none of that is true. All we ask for are two things from Western leaders, including the government of the United States of America, the most important democracy in the world. We ask only two things. One is honesty, to be open and honest about what is happening in Russia. Don't pretend that something is happening that is not happening. Don't call things for what they are not. Just call things for what they are. Just be honest and open about the situation. That is the first thing. And the second thing we ask for of Western leaders, including the United States, is please be true and be faithful to your own principles. Don't enable the export of corruption and abuse from the Putin regime to the West. Don't enable this behavior by providing havens, as so many Western countries have for so long, to those human rights abusers and those crooks and those corrupt officials from the Putin regime who steal in Russia but prefer to spend in the West, and who keep their money in Western banks, who send their kids to study in Western schools, who buy real estate and properties and mansions and yachts in Western countries. And the Magnitsky Act which was passed by this Congress almost 5 years ago, which introduced this very concept that those people who engage in human rights abuse and corruption should not be allowed to enter the U.S. or use the U.S. financial system. Boris Nemtsov was already mentioned in these hearings. He and I were sitting in the House Visitors Gallery on the day the Magnitsky Law was being passed. And I think every one of you present here voted for this law. And he called it, Boris Nemtsov called it, the most pro-Russian law ever passed in a foreign parliament, because it targets those people who abuse the rights of Russian citizens and who steal the money of Russian taxpayers. And that is commitment to principle. So this is all we would ask for of the U.S. government or any other government in the Western world.
Thank you.